This is Matthew Cratter from Trade University, and today I want to talk about government vampires stealing your time and money. By the way, if you haven't seen Nosferatu, great movie. This is not going to be a rant, though, about government taxes, etc. I actually have no problem with reasonable government taxes if they are used to help the citizenry, to help the infrastructure, etc. That's obviously not what the majority of the government taxes go to. But instead of talking about that and ranting about taxation, I want to talk about a concept called financial repression, which we touched on briefly in yesterday's video. And I got a lot of questions about it, and many of you don't seem to think that this is a real thing. So I wanted to talk about that. Obviously, we have the classic scene in Monty Python on help, help, I'm being repressed in the Holy Grail. Financial repression, though, is keeping government bond interest rates below the rate of inflation. So right now we have CPI inflation, consumer price inflation of 7.5% over the last 12 months, and where government bond yields. We can see here anywhere from a one-year government bond all the way out to the long bond, the 30-year bond. And as of yesterday, we can see that all of them are very clearly below 7.5%. They're very, very far away from 7.5%. Even the highest rate on the longest term, the longest maturity bond, is at 2.24%. So what this means is we're in a period of massively negative real rates. To calculate the real rate, you just subtract the nominal rate, you subtract the rate of inflation. And as a result, as we demonstrated in yesterday's video, if you have the one-year Treasury note, for example, at 1.14% and then CPI inflation at 7.5%, you end up with very deep negative real rates, minus 6 or 7%. So this is what financial repression is, and what it is, it's a sneaky way to steal from citizens, to steal from the public. Taxes are very visible. They need to be voted on by politicians, and they often make people quite angry. But financial repression is a hidden tax. It's a way to confiscate your citizens' hard work and savings through a hidden form of taxation. And right now, this is how the U.S. government is trying to avoid a hard default, because its spending has been completely out of control. So I want to show you a paper that talks about financial repression. But before I do that, we have to remind ourselves who the IMF is. This is an IMF working paper, I believe, from 2015. The IMF is one of these shadowy global organizations that was set up in the wake of Bretton Woods after World War II, when the monetary system was being reset. And they seem to have a very nice purpose. They want to secure financial stability for the world. Unfortunately, they're run by crooks. We've done many videos about this. Christine Lagarde, in my opinion, a crook. Strauss-Kahn, another IMF leader, did some very bad stuff to his housekeeper, which I can't even mention here. And Georgieva, who's a shell for the Chinese communists. So this is the group, but they do put out very interesting working papers, and you can tell that they're probably not working in our interests, of course, given the kind of people who run it. So this is, again, from 2015. It's called The Liquidation of Government Debt. And I just want to read you the abstract here to demonstrate where I'm getting this concept of financial repression from. It's actually a well-known concept in finance. So here's the abstract from this IMF working paper. High public debt often produces the drama of default and restructuring. We all remember when Argentina defaulted in 2001. It's defaulted, I think, a number of times over my lifetime. Default is when a government stops paying their interest or principal on their debt, and it can cause very bad chain reactions and financial contagion. So this paper is talking about an alternative to that. And it says a government can either default or go through restructuring like Argentina did, or the debt can be secretly reduced through financial repression. There's that word again, which is a tax on bondholders and savers via negative or below market real interest rates. And then they talk about how this was quite common in the years after World War II, as the U.S. government was trying to dig its way out of all the debt accumulated during World War II. After World War II, capital controls and regulatory restrictions created a captive audience for government debt, limiting tax base erosion. So it was very difficult to move your money out of the country, for example, to avoid this. And obviously the world was not nearly as connected, both in terms of information and in terms of financial flows, as it is today. Financial repression is most successful in liquidating debt when accompanied by inflation. For the advanced economies, real interest rates were negative of half of the time between 1945 and 1980. And then the final sentence of the abstract, we suggest that once again, financial repression may be part of the toolkit deployed to cope with the most recent surge in public debt in advanced economies. Obviously, this has gotten the global public debt, global government debt, has gotten much, much worse since 2015 when this was published. So that's the basic idea of financial repression. You can go back and watch my video from yesterday. But it shouldn't surprise you that if governments and if the IMF is really planning this, and this is a plan for all of the indebted nations of the world who come under the umbrella of the IMF, and this is basically everyone, especially the really large advanced economies that are massively in debt, like the Eurozone and the US, for example, they do not want you to have an exit. This is one reason the IMF hates Bitcoin and doesn't want El Salvador to use Bitcoin. They don't want any country to be outside of their control. And this should tell you something about Bitcoin. In a time of financial repression, and we talked about this yesterday, how people on the margins should begin to move out of government bonds, out of bonds in general, out of fixed income, and move a small percentage of their portfolio, or maybe a large percentage of their portfolio, like Bill Miller did, into Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is a way of hiding from financial repression. It's a very, very good hedge against the monetary debasement and the theft that happens when you go through a period of financial repression. And this decade is the period of financial repression. None of us have lived through it unless we're 100 years old. So just to summarize, financial repression, it is a form of theft. It's a way of stealing your life force, the fruit of your labors, the crystallization of your time. And we all have very limited time on earth. This is really what's more valuable than anything else, because it's so limited, and we don't even know how much time we have. Even billionaires cannot buy themselves that much more time. Maybe they can get some advanced medical treatments or do some creepy things to try to extend their lives, but even they cannot extend their lives by that much. And so when you spend hours on your commute in traffic, or hours of your waking life in a cubicle or on your computer working for someone else, you're making a sacrifice. You're spending time away from your kids, away from your family. And this is okay, but you have to recognize that you're trading your precious, limited time for money. And this is what we all need to do, and it's a good thing. But the problem is when you trade the special, precious, limited time for money, and then you have something like financial repression comes along, it siphons off that money to pay for reckless government spending, past government promises and past government spending that has been racked up as debt. And in this way, the government is stealing your life force. They're stealing your time. At the same time, they're telling you not to go into Bitcoin, as the IMF is telling you. So be very clear about what's happening. Keep an eye on inflation rates. Keep an eye on what's really happening here. Try not to be distracted by all the drama of geopolitical events or biological events or medical events. The substrate here, the base foundation of what is happening, this all has to do with a monetary reset that is happening through financial repression. And there can be many distractions, but I would urge you to keep your eyes on the prize. Bitcoin is the life raft that can get you out of all of this, and it can hide you and keep you safe from the government vampires that want to steal your life force through financial repression. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.